Download our complimentary guidebooks, checklists, and other useful financial resources at savantwealth.com/guides.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Savant live webinar, Working on Your Own Terms, A Guide to Semi-Retirement. My name is Libby Muldowney. I've worked at Savant for almost 16 years now, and I've served in the role of financial advisor for about the last 10. Combined, my husband and I have 4 kids, 2 dogs, and I've always lived in Rockford right here where we're headquartered, and it's a pleasure to be speaking with you today. Of course, this wouldn't be a financial presentation if it didn't start with disclosures. I want to make sure everyone understands that this is not meant to be specific financial advice. This is information and for educational purposes only. Anything that is specific to you or anything that you're interested in following up on or taking action on, you should speak to your financial advisor or CPA. The things we're going to go through today, of course, envisioning the future. If we're talking about semi-retirement, what exactly does that mean? Many of us may have an image of what we think it's going to be, and it could be different from the person next to us. So we want to talk through some different variables and how to pull that together. And working part-time sounds great. If I'm semi-retired, I'm getting only a semi-paycheck. So what do I need to do to replace that paycheck, and how do I keep my cash flow consistent? And certainly many of us get our health care provided through our employers. So if we're leaving our primary employer or leaving the workforce, how are we going to afford health insurance if we haven't had to do that in a private market before? And then, of course, taxes, everyone's favorite topic. Taxes in retirement or semi-retirement is very different than while you're in your working years if you're a W-2 wage earner. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that looks when you get to this phase. So envisioning the future, what is your vision of semi-retirement? I want to point out by saying that we want to zoom out and look at the big picture and look at the context of all of this and look where we're coming from. So previous generations' vision for retirement looked one way, but we're in a different era now, and we are still trying to fit into that old template of retirement, and it doesn't necessarily make sense in this day and age anymore, and we want to start to make some adjustments to that. So in previous generations, the timeline of your life would have looked something like this. There's a period of time where you're getting your education. And of course, in previous generations, you could get that education and pay tuition with a part-time job. We know that that time has passed and that's no longer attainable. But then once you have your education, you spend the bulk of your life working, grinding it out in that career job, whether it's a 9-to-5 office job. Whatever career path you're in, it is the primary way you spend all of your time for possibly even 40 years. And then at age 65 or so, people would retire, and life expectancies were shorter in previous generations. So you may only have to be planning for a retirement that might last 10 years or so. And therefore, it was easier. It was easier because it was shorter, and it was easier because you were able to relax. You wanted to relax. You didn't have necessarily the drive to do a whole lot anymore. And at the late end towards your life expectancy, that's okay. And so a short retirement of leisure made a lot of sense in previous generations. But where we are now, things have certainly changed. One thing that has changed is life expectancies have gotten longer, and our quality of life is improving due to all the medical advancements and just the health awareness people have taking care of ourselves. So in retirement, that full leisure, not having anything to do experience isn't as fulfilling to us because we're living longer. And again, we have more energy. So it makes more sense to start to look at a lifestyle perhaps that has more balance. So you can see in this timeline, there is still a phase of education, and then the bulk of your career phase. And then there's this retirement phase, which again might be part of a semi-retirement transition to full retirement type phase. So it looks a little bit different. So we need to do a little bit different planning. The other thing that really has changed is the availability of things like remote work. Having AI be there so you can delegate certain jobs and certain tasks away from you. And people have a lot more flexibility with some of these resources. So previously, people would always say, well, in retirement, I want to travel. Well, now you could look at, transitioning to a type of job where maybe you're able to work remotely and perhaps you are able to spend time overseas while you're doing some remote work or maybe part-time remote work. And then you're able to spend perhaps a month overseas rather than waiting to retirement and going there for a week or so. Now you can make it part of your lifestyle. You can make it part of this next phase, part of this transition. Other part-time work, it necessarily doesn't have to be online, right? Find something nearby, something that interests you, that you find fulfilling. Human beings like to find purpose. So oftentimes we find that by interacting with other people and making a contribution to something, and working to some extent gives us that satisfaction. Spending time with family may be a priority for others, and that may mean relocating. It may mean having a bigger budget for travel if family isn't in the immediate area. So that may be a big piece that we want to build out in somebody's retirement plan, as well as volunteer work and giving back to the community. Certainly, we are able to find fulfillment and satisfaction in spending time with family and volunteering. It doesn't necessarily just have to be through work. But this era gives us the flexibility to be able to build these priorities into our lives a little bit sooner if we don't necessarily have to stay chained to a desk or working that 9 to 5. So the semi-retirement phase is really looking at transitioning to a lifestyle that you don't necessarily even need to retire from, because you've closed the chapter of that day-to-day grind and you've transitioned to something that maybe is giving you less pay, but it is giving you more fulfillment. And how are you able to accomplish that? Well, at a point in our career paths and in our life's journey, maybe we've had kids and they've grown and they've left the nest. Therefore, we don't have the expenses of those kids that we have to take on anymore. And if kids have left, maybe we can downsize to a smaller home. If during this career phase, we have front loaded our retirement savings and have been contributing 20%, 10% to retirement accounts, if you no longer contribute to a retirement account when you transition to semi-retirement, but you leave it alone to grow for a period of time, that's the next best thing to contributing. So this looks like you work again in a career field to age 55. At this point, your kids are out of the house, you're ready to downsize, and you stop contributing to a retirement plan. Therefore, your expenses have gone down dramatically. So this gives you the opportunity to look for more fulfilling work and build these into your lifestyle versus waiting until retirement to be able to do these things and live a life that gives you more purpose and fulfillment than just clocking in and clocking out. So determining that vision is where you want to start. What does that look like? Maybe you traveled a lot in your career, so you absolutely don't want to travel at this phase. You want to stay home. For some people, they haven't been able to travel, and now's their chance. So just looking at what you want your life to look like, and then start to build specific goals that you need to achieve in order to make that happen. And then, of course, the action steps. So when you build this plan out, this will help you to map everything out, gauge your progress, and see how things are moving forward. And you may need to recalibrate from time to time, and that's completely normal. We know nothing ever goes completely according to plan. Well, Libby, that's all nice. But again, I still need to have cash flow. I'm still going to have expenses. And if we're talking about dropping out of the corporate grind workforce where we've been a W-2 earner all of our careers, there are other sources of income that will start to pull on once we're in retirement. So the first thing you do want to identify is what your spending is going to be. So I mentioned perhaps adjusting that budget down because you don't have the house, don't have the kids, and you don't need to allocate 20% to a retirement account anymore. Because during this, I'm just going to say 55. Let's say you leave the corporate world at 55, and for the next 10 years, you're going to work part-time. If you have front-loaded your retirement savings up to age 55, and for the next 10 years, you take a pay cut and you only are working part-time, but you're no longer needing to contribute to that retirement plan, 10 years of growth on those retirement assets will still be meaningful towards the future. So again, that's a way that you're able to back down your budget and your earnings because you don't necessarily need to replace everything that you earned before. Things that you want to consider when building your budget, of course, are your life expectancy. We are living longer, so you want to make sure you account for that. And when you're planning the timeline, what that might look like. Generally speaking, being conservative on that end is not a bad idea. None of us know when the Grim Reaper will come knocking, of course, but planning to live through a long life expectancy, even into longevity, will give you a buffer and gives you some wiggle room. Because even if you don't live that long, if you've planned to live that long, so you have additional resources, if certain things come up that you weren't planning, maybe a nursing home stay, for example, if that happens, you can use those resources to fill that need. So it's not a bad idea to plan for longevity. And that way you have that buffer and you have kind of a safety net built in anyway. One thing that you'll want to do is run this through what we call a Monte Carlo analysis. And I will illustrate that here in a moment. But what that's looking at is portfolios as a part of how retirement savings or retirement portfolios are going to contribute to meeting your cash flow needs. And then, of course, when you're building this budget of what you think you're going to need to spend in retirement, we don't want to leave out the expense of healthcare. It can be sticker shock when you've had your employer cover that for you for your lifetime, and now the full burden is on you. So we don't want to overlook that expense when we're building this out. But again, there's things we can remove. The retirement savings, the kids, the house, maybe even other things that you were spending money on during your working career that are no longer going to be a part of your life. So there'll be things that you're taking away and things that you're adding when you're developing your budget. Now, once you have the budget of what amount you want to spend, the next layer is, where am I going to pull this from? Well, if we're talking about the portfolio, which is just one of the sources, it's important to note that there are restrictions on retirement accounts. So you get a tax benefit for making a contribution to a 401k, maybe another qualified plan through an employer. IRAs, if you're eligible, you can take a tax deduction for making contributions to those types of retirement accounts. The government wants to incentivize you to save for retirement, and that's why you get a tax break. But we know there's no free lunch. There's a catch, of course. So while you get that tax deferral for saving for retirement, they put these limits of when you can access it without penalty. So 59.5 is for IRAs. You're not going to be able to access an IRA prior to that age without a penalty. 401ks, some plans, maybe you can access at 55, some it's 59. It depends. So if you're planning on retiring at 55 and it's prior to, of course, this 59.5-year-old guideline that the government sets, you'll want to make sure you're saving in a different bucket other than just those qualified tax deferred accounts. A Roth is an alternative if you're eligible to save in Roth. And also you can save in just a taxable non-retirement brokerage investment account that isn't associated with retirement benefits, so there's no restrictions on it. So you want to look to build different buckets so that when you're drawing money, you have accessibility and availability, no matter what age you retire at. Another source is going to be Social Security. This is a big one. Everybody wants to know the right answer. So I'm going to back up a little bit and just kind of start at the beginning and state that you can claim Social Security as early as age 62. If you wait and don't claim at age 62, every year you wait, the monthly benefit you receive will increase. there is an important milestone along this path called full retirement age. For most people, that's age 66 and a half, 67. It depends on your date of birth. It is a graduated kind of progression there. The full retirement age for Social Security claiming is relevant because it will be affected by the earnings test. Well, what is the earnings test? The earnings test says that if you have claimed Social Security prior to full retirement age, so age 62, 63, 64, 65, if you've claimed Social Security and you're still working, so you've decided to semi-retire, you're going to use Social Security and you're going to use part-time income as well. If you're claiming it prior to full retirement age, there could be a penalty if your earnings are too high, where Social Security will claw back some of their benefit. So you're limited in your earnings potential if you claim Social Security prior to the full retirement age. Once you've passed your full retirement age, that no longer applies. There's no limit to the amount of earnings that you can generate. And then there's not a penalty once you're past full retirement age. Now you can keep deferring and keep increasing your annual benefit up to age 70. Once you've reached age 70, there's no longer a benefit to continue deferring as you've maxed it out. So you want to claim at the very latest at age 70. So there's a lot of things to consider when you're determining when you should claim. And there's even a list here of other unique circumstances that may apply to you. Things like ex-spouse benefits, survivor benefits, spousal benefits. There could be a combination of those benefits as well. Now, the best place to get that information will be the Social Security office, as they do the calculation on the benefit for those. And they will be able to help you so you know what the budget and what to expect would be for that. But if you're trying to determine 66, 67, 70, life expectancy might be part of that decision. It's always fair to say personal preference can play a role in this as well. Some people feel very strongly that, hey, I've worked and I've contributed to this and I'm not waiting a single day longer and I'm going to start taking this money as soon as I can. Others, if we're planning for a long life expectancy, if we do the math and we are planning for a lifestyle that's into the 80s or mid 80s or above, if you deferred to age 70 and you live long enough, you will be able to maximize the amount of money you get from the Social Security program. So that's why life expectancy does play into that. And while we don't always know what that looks like, if we're planning for longevity, that's something to consider. So there's no one answer of when is the right age to claim Social Security. It's going to depend on a variety of factors, as well as what other resources you have. So for example, I'm going to give you a scenario here of a couple age 65 that have built out their budget for retirement, and they want to spend about $120,000 a year. They are planning for that 30-year time frame. So age 95 or so is what they are projecting. And they have $1 million saved in their portfolio. They know their fixed income as a household is $68,000. So that would indicate that both spouses are eligible for a Social Security benefit, and they have both claimed their Social Security benefit. And the total household income is $68,000 from that source. One of them is going to continue working, and they're anticipating about $12,000 a year. Well, there's a bit of a shortfall there to achieve that $120,000 budget. So this is where their $1 million portfolio comes in and fills the gap. Now, it doesn't have to always look exactly like this. If you don't have $1 million saved in your portfolio and you can't take a full $40,000 from it, well, maybe that means you need to reduce your budget, or maybe it means you need to increase your part-time wages and work a little bit more. So there's endless variables that can be shifted around to put the puzzle together, but starting to gather all of that information and understand what it looks like will be the first step. Now, that $40,000 coming out of $1 million portfolio is a withdrawal rate of about 4%. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment as to why we arrive at that number. So again, looking at the supplemental sources, the fixed income sources that you're going to have, whether it's Social Security, whether it's a pension, certainly understanding what those numbers are, and then understanding your portfolio balance and how much you can sustainably take out of that portfolio over time, which plays into how those investments are structured, what the risk is of those portfolios, and whether or not you want to keep your portfolio sustainable, meaning you don't deplete the principal, or maybe you're perfectly happy spending down the principal. Some people feel very strongly about leaving an inheritance to their heirs, so they're not going to want to rapidly deplete the balance. Some individuals say, well, I definitely want to leave money behind, and so I want to make sure I'm spending less. Other people say, I can't take it with me, spend it down, and when it's gone, and I don't have a desire to leave a legacy. So again, there's always personal preferences that need to be built into these considerations as well. And then the goal here, generally speaking, is we want to keep the portfolio sustainable, meaning generally we're not targeting a goal to deplete it. And the reason for that is because we don't know what the future holds. And by having kind of a buffer and some wiggle room, it gives you strength in your plan to be able to pivot as needed. So I've thrown out a couple of withdrawal rates you've seen on the slides. There was a 4% draw rate, which on $1 million portfolio was 40,000. Then we saw a range that said something like 3 to 5%. We're all in the same ballpark. The general idea here is that many retirees have an investment portfolio that is a balanced mix of preservation-based assets and growth assets. So preservation-based assets are going to be stable. They don't have a lot of growth, but they also won't go down as much. They should maintain. That's what they're there to do. Then you'll have growth assets, which along the way, they may go up and down. You will experience downturns in the market, but you will also experience upturns. And the way you want to balance there and why is when you are a retiree drawing from your portfolio, those preservation assets are for today, and you use those to cash flow what you need right now. And then those growth assets are going to be what helps keep up with inflation down the road because they'll be left to grow towards the future. So a balanced portfolio then, generally speaking, you would have a goal of maybe getting at least 6%, 7% on a conservative kind of expectation of what a portfolio may be possible to return. Now, that's not a guarantee, certainly, but if you are returning something around that and you're drawing less than that, you can see how those numbers kind of come together to let you know why it's sustainable and why it's not depleting. Now, again, there's always more to the story and determining what draw rate is appropriate for you. So time frame is going to play a big role into this. For example, if you're going to start drawing on your portfolio at age 55 and we need it to last 40 years or so into your 90s, because we need it to last over a very long period of time, you're going to be on the low end of that draw rate. Versus if you wait to start drawing on your portfolio to much later, maybe you don't draw on it till 65 or so, well, maybe you can accelerate some of those distributions and be on the higher range of what a draw rate would be. One thing you want to consider too is that this draw rate has to also pay taxes and expenses, so you actually would net less. So you want to be aware of the types of accounts in the portfolio and what type of tax they're creating, and then of course the cost of the investments, etc., so that you're not netting 6% and then paying your expenses and taxes on top of that, and then you end up actually drawing 8% out of the portfolio. You want to make sure that those expenses are considered when you're determining where on the spectrum is a good place for you. And then, of course, how the portfolio is invested. I mentioned perhaps a balanced mix, but there is no right answer for everyone. Individual preference, individual circumstances are going to play into what appropriate asset allocation would look like for you. And the asset allocation could lend itself towards one end of this draw rate spectrum. So if you're looking for a guideline of, okay, I know what my Social Security is going to be, I know what the pension's going to be, but what the heck can my portfolio do? Starting with a portfolio draw rate of somewhere around 4 to 6% will give you a ballpark. It is not set in stone because there are many variables, but at least it can give you an idea of how that will play a role in your retirement cash flow. So with so much uncertainty in the market, how do we prepare for that? How do we manage that? The Monte Carlo stress test is really a great name for it, because the best thing you can do with a plan is find the weak points. And what you want to do is poke holes in it and find out what could possibly go wrong, and then fill in the gaps and see what needs to be fixed. You also want to see a variety of potential outcomes, maybe like a range of good and bad outcomes, so you understand the likelihood of your plan working. You can see a dial on the screen here that shows an 87% success rate, and that is in what we call the confidence zone. So we're not targeting a 100% confidence rate on this stress test, and that's because over time we can make adjustments. So getting in the confidence zone is really the goal. And this is what that looks like. So on this graph, there are many, many green squiggly lines and fewer red lines. And each one of those lines represents a possible market outcome over the span of your retirement period. So when we are building this model, we want to put in your time frame, right? How old you are when you're retiring or when you're drawing on this, and how long you're going to live. We want to put in your asset mix, your allocation. We want to put in how much you plan to draw out of this portfolio every year. Those are fixed variables, and then a software can run market trials all over the place. And again, you can see a wide range of outcomes. The 87% success rate means 870 out of 1,000 trials are successful. But you can see a wide range of what that looks like. Success is simply defined as you didn't run out of money and you were able to reach your spending goals. But at the end of your life, depending on what the market did, you could have millions of dollars or $1. All of those are considered successful in this type of modeling. So it's important to understand that there's a wide range of what it looks like at the end of the rainbow, but at least having comfort knowing that you won't run out of money, or you're in a confident zone where you won't, can make you move forward on that path with confidence. Why don't we need 100%? The software takes 1 year and repeats it 30 times. In reality, people's lives aren't linear, right? There are some years where there are bigger expenses, some years where maybe there's not so much. Maybe there's discretionary expenses that you can choose to take money out for a project or for a trip, or you can delay it depending on what the market's doing. So we have the ability throughout retirement to make adjustments, and that way you can stay on path and stay on track. So health insurance is another issue. As mentioned, once you go to the private market, if you retire prior to age 65 and you leave your employer and they provided your healthcare benefit, there's a period of time here where you're going to need to get on private healthcare. And it can be very expensive, particularly because the sticker shock is there since you haven't had to pay for all of it up to this point. But there's a couple different things that you can consider. So a COBRA policy is simply an extension of the current plan you are in. So if you were in an employer plan and you terminate employment for 18 months, you can stay in the same network, the same insurance plan, but you are now fully responsible for the premium, but at least you've stayed in your same network. So that's a nice bridge. At least there's less unknown with that. It'll only get you 18 months at most. If you're in a partnership, if you're married and one of you is working and one of you decides to transition to this semi-retirement, maybe there's an age gap and one of you is older and one is younger and wants to continue working, one spouse who can get health care may be able to provide health care for their spouse as well. So if there is the opportunity for that, that's something to consider. And of course, the Affordable Care Act is where you can go online and you can shop around for policies and find whatever is appropriate for you based on premiums, deductibles, networks, and possible prescription needs, specialists. Those are things you would want to consider when you're looking at the options when you're buying your own private health care. Don't want to rule out that some employers rather do offer healthcare throughout retirement as an employee benefit. It might not be full coverage, but it might be paying some supplemental. It might pay the premiums, and that's something that you don't want to overlook. And of course, if you know that's a feature with your employer, you can then build that into your plan. Some part-time jobs will be able to offer health benefits, which is a huge advantage if you're able to find something like that. And then, of course, health savings accounts. Now, a health savings account is a tax-favored savings account that you can use for certain qualified medical expenses. So how this works is throughout your working career, that corporate phase of your career, if you know you want to retire prior to age 65 and you're going to have to be fully independently responsible for private health care, you can start to fund this health savings account. When you fund it, you get a tax deduction for making a contribution. So you're incentivized, or there's at least a tax benefit for funding that. And then the assets grow tax-free. And if you're taking the money out to pay for healthcare expenses that the IRS qualifies and approves for this treatment, then the distributions can be tax-free. So again, if you know that you want to retire early, if you're eligible to contribute to a health savings account, you can start to build up a specific bucket of money that you can earmark for these eventual high healthcare costs that you may have to endure prior to age 65. This is a range of expenses that may be expected. Of course, things vary, and of course, they're going to be unique and specific to you, your age, your health status, and of course, what type of policy you get based on what needs you have. The range here, it's an added $5,000 to $12,000 a year. It's a pretty big range, but again, it is going to be an increase for most people who have had their insurance covered by their employer. I think the most interesting bullet on here is that the average employee covers only 22% of their insurance premium costs and the rest covered by their employer. So again, it can be a big sticker shock, and you have to prepare for that in your budget line items. Another thing to consider, I mentioned before, is finding a part-time job that offers benefits. Now, in some cases, in some sectors, the benefits that you get as an employee could exceed the benefit that you get from a wage from that job. There's images on here of a librarian, looks like a teacher, and working in the public sector, working for the state, working for the government often comes with a lot of benefits. And let's say you end up being a part-time librarian or a part-time secretary, and the wage you receive maybe isn't significant, but the benefits that you get, such as full health care coverage, maybe even healthcare coverage into retirement, those are really creative ways of making this work for you if you can find a part-time job or a type of company where the benefits are the true, winner there. And it's not so much the wage you're earning, but rather what you get for being an employee. And you can be really creative with a lot of different ways of making that happen. Everyone's favorite topic, minimizing taxes. We all have to pay taxes, but we want to be efficient with the taxes that we pay, and we want to be strategic about those taxes. So I'm just going to use the example of a W-2 worker who is earning a wage and they're doing their tax deduction or taking the standard deduction. They're contributing to a 401k. Maybe there's some donations and some credits along the way. And that really is the extent of the tools you may have to reduce your tax burden when you're earning that type of income. Now, when you're preparing your tax return during this corporate phase of your career, you generally are looking at each year in a silo. What do I need to do this year to reduce my tax burden? Is it make a contribution? Is it claim a credit? What options do I have this year to reduce my tax burden? Now, when you're in retirement, this looks very different because what we are looking at is how can we reduce your lifetime tax burden? So the period of time in retirement is going to have different windows that may have different requirements of when money has to come out of certain accounts. And we want to know that ahead of time so we can plan ahead and maybe spread some of that income out so it doesn't get all crammed into one year in the future. So what this might look like is accelerating some income into earlier years in retirement. Even if you're not spending it, you might volunteer to pay the tax on it now so that you're not burdened with significant tax later. And that type of strategy is what we call lifetime tax management. For many individuals during their working career, it doesn't look like that because, well, again, with wages, you're limited. But in retirement, when you have different sources of income, and we've discussed Social Security, portfolio distributions, and even within a portfolio, different account types, IRAs, Roths, non-retirement taxable brokerage accounts, they all have different tax treatments. And we can pull from those different sources and control what the tax bracket looks like. And again, we can spread it out over a period of years. And that way you don't get any big jumps in the future while you get stuck paying even more. So another way of tax efficiency is structuring a portfolio with what we call asset location. This may be going on with your advisor, maybe going on in your portfolio if you've hired a professional. It's pretty unusual for individual investors to look at this as a strategy. But what it is as mentioned, different account types have different tax treatments. A Roth, for example, grows completely tax-free. But a traditional IRA, every single dollar that you take out of a traditional IRA, whether it's gross or what you contributed, is taxed to income tax rates. And income tax rates are your highest tax rate. Taxable non-retirement brokerage accounts are taxed on gains and appreciation rather than income. And the gains rates are generally less than the income tax rates. So if all of these account types have different tax treatments and you have a balanced portfolio with different types of investments, if there is strategy around locating specific securities in a specific account type for tax efficiency, that will reduce the overall tax that you pay in your lifetime. Now, this is fairly intangible. It's not a tax deduction or a credit that shows up on your return that's quantifiable. It's more tax avoidance than tax deduction. So it's really looking at ways of just reducing overall tax by proper structure. Another strategy is tax loss harvesting, which is the silver lining to down markets. If you have an investment that's at a loss and you sell it, you book that loss that year. Now, that loss can be used to offset gains. If you don't have a gain that year to offset, that loss can be carried forward to future years. So tax loss harvesting says in a down market, go ahead and capture those losses and book them, even if you don't use them, because down the road, you may have some significant gains, and now those losses can offset the tax impact of those gains. So again, planning ahead can help with this lifetime tax planning strategy. So when somebody's retiring, if they are selling a business, that's a big event that may have a big tax impact. Some people might retire with a retirement package from their employer that has to distribute within a certain period of time. Maybe it's 1 year, 3 or 5 years, but it's a very short window of time where they have to receive a lot of income all at once. Or maybe there's stock options that mature upon retirement, and so they have to capture those, and that has a tax impact. Well, again, if we know as you approach retirement that you may be selling a business or have a plan that distributes or stock options that mature, And we know in the future there's going to be a big tax event. Along the way, if we're capturing losses while the market is down, because inevitably markets go down, they go back up, it's a cycle, but we take that as an opportunity to capture those losses and bank them for future events that we can use to offset. We can do something similar with charity as well. So there's ways of structuring charitable gifting to offset big years of income. So again, you're not looking at 1 year at a time. You're looking generally over your lifetime in retirement. So where you'd want to start if you're going to work with a financial advisor or a tax planner is to bring your current paycheck and of course your current tax return. And you're going to want to do this at a time that is not tax deadline sensitive. So tax preparation has very strict deadlines, and certainly that's going to be the focus and the priority of tax planners as we approach those deadlines. So you'll want to work with a planner not during that big period of time. And you'll want to talk to your CPA to find out if these are strategies that they're comfortable with and familiar with. Because some CPAs are excellent at that tax preparation to get the return ready, but planning how to manage income and what accounts to pull from may not be everyone's area of specialization. So you'll want to make sure that you're working with either a financial advisor or planner that understands those concepts and can help navigate that for you. So now we're at next steps of this all sounds great. Gosh, where do I start? It's a little overwhelming to look at all of these things. Well, we have a Career Crossroads workbook. There will be a link to that. It should be in the chat. Following today's webinar, we will send out a recording, and a link to the Career Crossroads workbook will be included in that. Also, it's available on the Savant website. So you can go on there at any time and poke around to find the Career Crossroads workbook. This is an excellent exercise to put pen to paper and start to crystallize what you want retirement to look like. So you start with that vision. And if you're married or in a couple and you have a vision, it's important to, of course, communicate and share that vision with your partner and make sure you two are on the same page. Everybody has some high level things that they think might be in common, but when you get right down to it, there might be things that need to be navigated a little differently. So having an exercise like this to go through to list that vision, and then the goal, and then the action steps you need to take to achieve that goal will be a real tangible way, again, to create a map and track your progress as you start to develop a plan of what this might look like for you. And it might feel strange to spend so much time on this planning if you haven't done it before. A lot of people, unfortunately, spend more time planning for their European itinerary for a week's vacation than they spend on retirement planning. They may meet with their advisor only once a year, which is okay, depending on where you are on your path. But you definitely want to spend time on your own, again, developing those visions and understanding the steps you need to take to make things come together. We spend much of our lives caring for others, whether we are caring for children or caring for elderly parents. Maybe we have diverted saving from retirement and instead we've been saving in 529 plans for our family and children, and we haven't spent enough time on our own retirement planning. And I encourage you to take the time and go through that Career Crossroads workbook and start to focus on developing your strategies. If you don't know where to start yet, and you get that vision board and it's still a little overwhelming, a thought exercise to employ is to look backwards instead of looking forward. So if where you are now and you're trying to say, well, this is where I want to be in 30 years feels nebulous because there's so much uncertainty, one way to really start to develop a vision could be to start envisioning yourself somewhere in your 80s, maybe you're in your 90s, and you're in your rocking chair on your porch and you're looking back on your life. If there's anything that jumps out as a potential regret that you may have if you don't achieve it, or if you don't accomplish it, or if you don't check it off your bucket list, knowing that feeling that you would have is a good indicator of something that you would want to include in your vision if it's something that you feel you would regret. Additionally, if you've built out a vision and say your priority is spend more time with family, but you recognize that at this time you're prioritizing your career and you're focused on that, if you then say, hey, at age 80, I'm really going to regret not living my life to my values like I wanted to, now you might have some time to reflect and adjust. So that can be a good thought exercise to look backwards and give you an opportunity to start getting those wheels turning. And that is the end of my prepared remarks today. I encourage everyone to put Q&A. I see I've got some, so I'm going to go through some of those. I won't be able to get through all of them today, but I'll certainly go through some Q&A here. Also encourage you to fill out the survey at the end of this webinar and click on the link to schedule an introductory call with a representative here at Savant if you're interested. And of course, a reminder of those disclosures. This is educational, informational only. This is not meant to be personal financial advice. Everybody's situation is unique, and you'll want to work with an expert and tie in together the specific situations for you. So now I'm going to go to some questions and see what we've got here. I'm concerned Social Security won't be around. Should I claim early and not wait? Social Security does have layers of kind of political, drama associated with it, right? Will it be here? Will it not be here? I can tell you that generally speaking, when we don't know, when there's uncertainty, there's a couple ways you can approach it. You can say, hey, it's uncertain, so I'm going to rule it out and just assume I don't have it. Or you can operate under the assumption of the status quo, which is, well, right now, this is what Social Security is paying. So right now, this is the assumption I'm going to make. We hear a lot of headlines that the Social Security program is not sustainable as it is right now. And if things keep going as they are, it will run out. But that key is if things keep going as they are going, meaning there will be adjustments and changes in order to keep it going. Now, my hope, although I certainly can't say with any certainty, would be that they would not start pulling benefits away from retirees or people close to retirement who have built out their plans and are on, the end of the road and they're ready to start claiming those. It could be pretty catastrophic for individuals. But if they make adjustments to younger generations and perhaps they increase the amount of the wage withholding on younger generations, then that gives those individuals time to adjust their expectations. So I would be hopeful that if there are going to be adjustments, it wouldn't be for people that are in or right at retirement. But it's okay to say that if you want to claim Social Security early because you feel strongly about getting that money back, you paid it in and you don't want to wait a moment longer. Again, just understanding the different options and the trade-offs and how it affects you can help with shaping that decision, whether or not you should claim early or maybe wait. They're also talking about retirement age, moving to age 70. How does that fit? In the context of today's presentation, I want to say that retirement is not an age. When I'm talking about this semi-retirement, I'm talking about a big lifestyle shift. And retirement in this context means that you can work if you want to, and you have full control over your time. That to me can be more important when defining retirement than an age. If the government is stating age 70 for retirees, that's going to be for things like Medicare or that full retirement age and Social Security. And if you're strategizing and building a plan with the goal of retiring early, the whole point of that is that you are building other resources so that you are not dependent on those programs right away. Eventually, you'll be able to take advantage of them, and you certainly should. But the idea of this lifestyle shift and this overall planning is so that you can retire when you want, and you don't have to wait for age 70 or whatever the government decides is the retirement age. How are Medicare premiums linked to most recent income years? So when you claim Social Security, when you claim Social Security, your Medicare premium is automatically deducted from that. And the premiums that you pay are associated with your income. So the less income that you have, the less premium you pay towards your Medicare. And the more income you have, the more premium you would pay towards the Medicare bill. Now, there can be unique circumstances. For example, that first year in retirement, hey, last year I earned 6 figures, but now I'm retired and I'm only going to be working part-time and I'm going to be earning $20,000, but I'm having to pay based on my prior year's earnings record. Well, those can be disputed, or they can be, there's amendments that can be made. There's forms that can be filed to have that adjusted if there's an income event. Same thing, like if you sell a business and there's a huge windfall one year, if it's not going to be repeated and you're able to dispute and prove that, sometimes that can be amended, and that then you don't have to be hit with that increase in premium. What are your thoughts on converting a traditional IRA to Roth? So this ties in that lifetime tax strategy planning, because that's exactly what you're doing when you're doing what is called a Roth conversion. A Roth conversion means you're taking money out of an IRA, paying the tax on it, and now putting it in a Roth account so it can grow tax-free. Well, why would we do that? Again, there's different windows of time and different tax brackets that may come into play in the future. If there's income events in the future that you're aware of, you might want to start taking money out of that IRA when you're in a low tax bracket, and that can be done via a Roth conversion. And that's a way of spreading out the tax burden over your lifetime rather than putting it all towards the future. If you're trying to avoid taxes as long as you can, remember, you're not eliminating them, you are just avoiding them, because that tax bill is going to come due. So spreading them out throughout your lifetime is a good way to manage that, and Roth conversions are a good tool for that. Well, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. Everyone have a good day.
If you enjoyed this webinar, visit savantwealth.com/guides and download our complimentary guidebooks, checklists, and other useful financial resources.